Right bracket Chapter 9. A Relief Mine Story. By Jesse L. Young. Brigham Young once said, "When the agricultural resources of Utah are exhausted, the Lord will raise up a farmer to open up some rich mining claims for the benefit of Zion, and that, the angels have charge of the riches of the earth, and they can move them about as easily as I can walk to and fro in this isle." In the Doctrine and Covenants, sec. 38 v 39, the Lord said, "And if ye seek the riches which it is the will of the Father to give unto you, ye shall be the richest of all people, for ye shall have the riches of eternity, and it must needs be that the riches of the earth are mine to give, but beware of pride, lest ye become as the Nephites of old." When John H. Coyle was a small boy, he went to the mouth of Spanish Fork Canyon with his father to get a load of rock with which to build a house. His father took a bar and pried a rock loose, and a slug of rocks caved off, killing him and rolling all around John, who was climbing up the steep slope. John's life was spared for a purpose by the Lord. On another occasion, John was walking along the road behind a wagon. The wheels ran over a big rattlesnake, cutting it in half, and when John came near the snake, it struck him on the leg. They sucked the venom out and he recovered. This was one of many incidents when his life was spared. The Lord had a work for him to do. Right bracket When John grew up, he got married and lived in Leland. One day he went to conference. The speaker said, "If you want a testimony of the gospel, ask the Lord for it, pray in secret." This John did for a year but didn't get his testimony. He went to conference again and the speaker said, "If you do not forgive one another their trespasses, the Lord will not forgive you, and will not hear your prayers." John said, "I have not done that, but I will now," and he did. He had a heifer that had been lost for 3 weeks. He searched everywhere but found no trace of her. So he did a little more praying. He then dreamed that if he would go down to the railroad crossing near his farm at 10 o'clock the next day, he would find his cow, with her horn broken and sticking down into her eye. Then he was asked, "If you find this heifer as shown, will you believe in the Lord and the gospel? Will this be a testimony to you?" He said, "Yes." Next morning he got on his horse, rode down to the track, and there was his heifer just as he saw her in the dream. He was so pleased and thankful for the testimony that he promised the Lord he would serve him in whatsoever capacity the Lord may require. John next dreamed that he was to go on a mission for the church. "Will you go?" To which he said, "Yes." It was not long after that he got a letter from Box B. This was the official church mailing address. It was a call to a mission to the southern states. He went to the house to tell his wife, "I'm going on a mission." She said, "You can't go on a mission. You haven't any money." But he said, "I'll go. The Lord will provide." He had 4 or 5 head of cattle, and a voice said to him, "Kill 2 of your steers and sell the meat to your friends and neighbors." The Icelanders in Spanish Fork whom Bishop had befriended gladly bought quarters of the meat to divide among themselves. That furnished the money for him to go. He went and had a lot of wonderful spiritual experiences concerning the right bracket work. Once he was warned of mob violence which was planned against them. This was avoided by giving heed to his warnings. Some surveyors had gone through his farm laying out a line for a new railroad which would cut his farm in 2. He prayed for the Lord to change their plans, and he did. They pulled up their stakes and made a new line, missing his farm completely. All of these wonderful experiences were for the preparation and strengthening of John Coyle to meet the requirements and responsibility of his great mission with the relief mine, which was to bring relief to a suffering people in time of great suffering, hunger and want. The time had come for his great work to commence. An angel appeared to him and announced his mission and call from the Lord. He said, "The Lord has called you to open up a rich gold mine, for the benefit of Zion and the world in a time of trouble, such as the world has not known. This time of trouble will be ushered in by a financial crash. We go to bed at night and awake in the morning with no light, water, gas or heat. The money will become worthless, not worth the paper it is written on. An armful would not buy a loaf of bread." Brother Coyle was overwhelmed at the great responsibility and began to offer all manner of reasons why someone else with mining experience, that knew all about mining, should be called. The angel said the Lord can't use one who knows everything, he must have one who does not know all things, one that will depend upon the Lord for guidance and direction. Then it remains the Lord's work and that cannot fail. The wisdom of men shall perish, and the works of men shall come to naught with frustration. Right bracket Coyle consented, and the angel took him through the mountain, and showed him all the wonderful things he would find, as he tunneled into this holy mountain. They went through tunnels, drifts and shafts as if they were already made. He saw water at 300 feet, a black vein at 410 feet, a rusty iron-colored ore at 1300 feet, a map of North America at 1800 feet. A cream-colored vein 3 inches wide on the left side of the tunnel and opening up on the right side, and by following that 20 feet he would strike a perpendicular vein that would dip down to a rich vein of gold ore that would have to be sacked to save the riches. Then at 2000 feet he would strike a vein 3 inches wide on the north, 18 inches on the south with a beautiful hard slick wall. This vein would lead into 5 fingers, each leading into rich bodies of gold and quartz. At 2200 feet he would strike water that would fill a ditch in the tunnel along the track, and near the end of the tunnel he would find a chimney of soft material that would lead down to a capstone of hard rock that would be so hard it would take a month to go through this 3-foot layer. Beneath this capstone he would find a rich white quartz vein that would lead to the 9 rooms where the ancient Nephites worked and left large crock jars full of coins and a lot of other items including tools, records, etc. These things in the tunnel are there to be seen by all who desire to check the report. The tunnel that went into Water Canyon was opened when they first went and investigated, but was covered up by a cloudburst flood soon after. The time had come to get the work started, and Coyle was instructed to get Brockbank, his brother-in-law, to go help him stake out the claims and open up the mine, because Coyle didn't know how to locate or stake the claims. After a lot of persuasion they went up with team and buggy, the road was washed out, and they had to walk. When they got up on Knob Hill, they sat down to rest a bit. As they scanned the mountain, a light shone on the white hill brighter than the sunlight. Coyle said, "Can you see what I am looking at?" They both saw the same thing. Coyle said, "Go and stick this pick in the ground where you see it." He did, and by digging down 18 inches, they found a vein of ore that assayed gold. That was the place to sink a shaft. They went down 1385 feet, and it took 22 men to work and pull that muck out by hand. It was winter with snow waist deep on the mountain, and Coyle had a dream that he was to go down to the face of the mountain and start a tunnel. There will be 2 bare spots, the bottom one will be the size of a tunnel on the spot where you shall make the opening. When the men came to the house for breakfast, Coyle told them the dream. They laughed and said, "There are no bare spots on this mountain. This is one dream that will fail." Coyle and 2 husky doubters headed down the face into the draw. The snow was soft and up to their armpits in places. Lars Olsen was first to the scene and yelled, "Here it is, sure enough. We'll dig the tunnel here." Coyle was still a true prophet. Right away they took the bunkhouse apart and skidded it over snow by hand, down the steep mountain, and set it back together on its present site. They started the tunnel and followed instructions in order to find all the things Coyle had been shown. He had to take hold of a maple tree with one hand and lean out as far as he could reach and go straight into the mountain. They struck water at 300 feet, just like he saw it in his first visit. They dug a hole big enough to dip a bucket full of water from. It would never run over, yet it would supply all their needs. The bunkhouse caught fire one morning, and with the bucket brigade, they dipped enough water to put the fire out and saved the house. Always enough, but never a surplus according to the promise. Coyle had a farm in Idaho and wanted to go there to look after things and enjoy a vacation, so he put Peter Carlston in charge of the mine and went to the farm. Sometime later he was sitting in the living room and heard a conversation between Peter Carlston and others. They were planning to let the claims go delinquent and then jump them and take over. Coyle got on the ball and went to Salt Lake to Peter's home and told him what was going on. Peter denied it several times. Then his wife in the kitchen spoke up and said, "Peter, stop your lying. You know you did." Then he broke down and confessed. Peter and Fred Bangerter got a large block of stock in the settlement. Coyle said it would never do them any good, and Fred and Peter are gone, and Fred is off the hill. Bishop Coyle was highly favored of the Lord with the gift of prophecy and discernment between friends and enemies. He would talk freely with friends and close up like a clam in the presence of enemies. Oftentimes he was forewarned. Once complaints were made against Coyle accusing him of selling worthless stock. Mr. Gull for the state said, "I'll take care of him and put him behind prison bars in 1 month." Bishop Coyle said, "Don't worry, he is the one that will be behind prison bars." As it turned out, Mr. Gull was put in prison for fraudulent dealings in stock. Coyle was called in, by revelation, to go before the prophet and receive his second anointing, which is a blessing few men get. This put him beyond the authority of earthly men, subject only to the power and dictates of the Lord. At one time a number of people in Spanish Fork became overpowered and possessed by evil spirits. When others failed to heal them, Bishop Coyle was called in. Through his faith and command, the Lord drove out the evil spirits. On one occasion they went out of one person, crossed the street and possessed a woman. She was also relieved by the laying on of hands of Bishop Coyle. Bishop Coyle was shown that the boys working in the mine were fooling around, pushing, jerking each other and acting badly, and that if they didn't stop it, someone would be killed. He called them in and warned them several times, but they would not heed. One day a gardener boy was fooling on a ladder and slipped and fell 200 feet to his death. The bishop and Lars Olsen were working in a tunnel one day. They were only a short distance in and were taking turns at drilling with a single jackhammer. While one drilled, the other would sit on a powder box at the entrance. They heard voices in conversation going up the trail and over the mountain. They could see no one nor understand what they said. They felt strange and uneasy, and neither of them wanted to sit on the box, but would insist on drilling. 20 years later 2 angels came to Bishop Coyle in the night and awoke him from sleep. The room lightened up bright as day. They reminded him of the time he and Lars heard voices near the tunnel and said, "We are the ones you heard. We are watching over this mine and have it in charge." They talked for 2 full hours about the greatness of the mission of the mine for future generations. The biggest thing in all the world, and then they told him never to tell a living soul what was said in the hour and a half, but he could tell the first half hour which pertained to the bishop's work. The bishop's wife, pled with him to tell her the hour and a half story. He said, "Are you a living soul?" She said, "Yes." "Then I can't tell it to you." Then one beautiful day 2 very close friends of the bishop's came over from Mapleton. He broke silence and told the hour and a half secret. Overflowing with joy and excitement the 2 got into the buggy and headed for home. As they jogged along, one of them said, "What did the bishop tell us?" Neither of them could remember one thing he said. What he was told was too sacred for this corrupt generation, but will be revealed to a righteous millennium people prepared to do God's will in all things. The half hour was that part which covered the bishop's work and mission. When the messengers come to remain and oversee the work, the wicked will not be able to get off the hill fast enough. Elder Talmage was sent to make a report on the mine. When he met with the men, he said, "I have 2 satchels, one scientific and the other apostolic. I have my scientific one today." He was rated as one of the 7 greatest scientists in the world. He looked over the mountain and in the tunnel, without finding anything showing that would indicate values worth mining. He then told the miners that they should pray to the Lord to show them what was right. The men said, "We have done that and received a testimony that it is true, just as sure as our testimony of the church is true." The sincerity of their testimonies puzzled Elder Talmage, and he said, "Brethren, pray for me." His report to the church was negative and caused a lot of trouble for Bishop Coyle and his family, in the form of mockery and persecution. After Brother Talmage died, he came back to Bishop Coyle and said, "Brother Coyle, I was the cause of the trouble and persecution heaped upon you and your family, and I cannot go on until I make things right. Will you forgive me and release me from this burden?" Bishop said, "With all my heart. I forgive you freely." Moses and Joseph Smith appeared to Bishop Coyle and gave him instructions which he did not divulge or say much about. Moses said, "I hope you don't have as much trouble with Israel as I had." When Bishop told this to us, Parley Pierce said, "If you are the one like Moses, you will not bring the mine in to deliver Israel from bondage and lead them into the land of promise." Nothing more was said. The bishop was reading the Doctrine and Covenants one morning, and at 10 o'clock he thought, "It's time to go into the mine and see what has showed up." He put the book on a shelf, took his lamp and walked up the trail toward the mine. He heard a voice say, "Go back and read section 111, it pertains to this place." He stopped, looked all around, but could see no one, so he started walking again. 3 times this was repeated, so he went back and read, "I the Lord your God am not displeased with your coming this journey, your life's journey, notwithstanding your follies, Coyle's follies. I have much treasure in this city, ancient, for you for the benefit of Zion, and many people in this city, whom I will gather out in due time for the benefit of Zion, through your instrumentality. Therefore, it is expedient that you should form acquaintance with men in this city, as you shall be led, and as it shall be given you. The men and inhabitants are the 3 immortal Nephites and their people. And it shall come to pass in due time that I will give this city unto your hands, that you shall have power over it, insomuch that they shall not discover your secret parts, and its wealth pertaining to gold and silver shall be yours. Zion's." Concern not yourselves about your debts, for I will give you power to pay them, gold and silver from the mine. Concern not yourselves about Zion, for I will deal mercifully with her, will gather the elect to a city of righteousness. Tarry in this place and in the regions around about, in Utah County right bracket and around about. And the place where it is my will that you should tarry, for the main, shall be signalized unto you by the peace and power of my Spirit that shall flow unto you, a holy city by the mine. This place you may obtain by hire men to dig the gold and silver mining, and inquire diligently concerning the more ancient inhabitants and founders of this city. The ancient inhabitants are the Nephites. Therefore, be ye as wise as serpents and yet without sin, and I will order all things for your good as fast as you are able to receive them. According to Bishop, a messenger told us, when the time and the conditions are right, you will have the ore and all the wealth you need. The conditions would be a few trustworthy people gathered out, a financial crash, transportation stopped, civil strife, foreclosures on debts, banks closed, worthless paper money, etc. There will be a 7-year period of changing conditions preceding the crash that will cause much suffering. The first year will have good crops, the second also, but the third year crops would suffer from drought, and the wheat would be shrunken and fit only for animal feed, and the fourth year would be a total failure, when there would not be enough for seed to plant the next year. If we get riches out of the mine, the first or second year we can get good wheat, but if we wait until the third year, we are too late. Bishop saw that he went up and down this country with plenty of money, but could buy no wheat anywhere. Another set of changes would climax this period. The US government will collapse, and there won't be a responsible power to collect taxes. The mine will come forth with wealth, and the LDS Church will be set in order with a new set of officials, and a return to the original laws and ordinances right bracket that were given to Joseph Smith in their true form. Joseph Smith said, if any man preach any gospel than this which I have preached, let him be accursed, yea, though he were an angel from heaven, and preach any other gospel than this which I have preached, let him be accursed. Bishop was carried in the spirit into the spirit world, where he saw beauty beyond anything he had ever seen on earth. The homes were neat, well arranged and surrounded with gardens of flowers that defied description, rare and brilliant colors not seen on earth. As he walked up the path toward a T-shaped house, his father, who had been dead a number of years, came out on the walk and greeted him with a hearty welcome. He said, John, I want you to go back to earth and teach the gospel to your brothers and sisters, and see that they repent and go to the temple and be sealed for time and eternity. Tell Harry if he doesn't quit his profanity and getting drunk, he will get an awful shaking up. John came back and went to work teaching and working with them, and they all were obedient, but Harry, who was stubborn and unwilling. John said to him, I have warned you these 3 times, and if you don't straighten up, you will be punished with an awful shaking up. The warning was like pouring water on a duck. He paid no heed until one day he was going up the trail in Flat Canyon taking supplies up to his sheep camp. He was walking, leading the pack horses through the oaks, when suddenly an unseen power seized him and shook him with such fury that when he clung to the oaks, it tore the flesh off his hands. That changed his whole life. He quit drinking and went to the temple and had his wife and children all sealed to him for eternity. Right bracket Bishop had a dream that the banks all over the United States would close in 1 month. He went to the Spanish Fork Bank and told the president to get his business in shape fast because the bank will close in 30 days. President Gardner smiled and said, we are okay and such a thing can't happen. The United States is back of us. At the end of the month Bishop was walking past the bank, and President Gardner called Bishop in and said, Bishop, a month is gone, and everything is lovely. Bishop said, just wait. I still have 1 more day, call me tomorrow. Early the next morning President Roosevelt declared a bank holiday, and all banks had to close. In World War I everybody over the country was talking about the highly efficient 145th Artillery. Bishop said they would never see action. The word came that the 145th Unit would go into action tomorrow. There were big headlines in the papers. A man from Salt Lake grabbed his paper and went to Bishop Coyle to prove him wrong, but Bishop said calmly, they will not see action, wait and see. The next day the armistice was signed and the war was over. Bishop Coyle was told by an angel to search the prophecies of Isaiah and put faithfully into practice the instructions given there. On Thursday we would fast all day and put in a full day's work, then at 7:30 p.m. we would meet and pray for the Lord to deliver us. Isaiah 56:1-3. Thus saith the Lord, keep ye judgment and do justice, for my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man that doeth this, and the Son of Man that layeth hold on it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keepeth his hand from doing any evil. Right bracket Isaiah 57:7. Upon a lofty and high mountain hast thou set thy bed. Even thither wentest thou up to offer sacrifice, sacrifice of time, labor, and his whole life to the bringing forth relief for a time of trouble, drought and famine. 8. Behind the doors also and the posts hast thou set up thy remembrance, calling upon the Lord, for thou hast discovered thyself to another than me, and art gone up, thou hast enlarged thy bed, built a new home, and made thee a covenant with them, stockholders, thou lovedst their bed where thou sawest it. He built a bunkhouse high upon the mountain where the workers boarded and slept. Then he had a night vision of a larger house at the foot of the mountain, with a porch and 2 porch posts. 9. And thou wentest to the King Jesus Christ, with ointment ... and didst debase thyself even unto hell. He listened to spiritual mediums. This was a time of trouble for Bishop Coyle. He was deceived into paying John Harper and his 2 partners a sum of money for a fake process for extracting metals from ore. 10. Thou art wearied in the greatness of thy way, yet saidst thou not, there is no hope. Thou hast found the life of thine hand, therefore thou was not grieved. 11. And of whom hast thou been afraid or feared, that thou hast lied, and hast not remembered me, nor laid it to thy heart? Have I not held my peace even of old, and thou fearest me not? Bishop feared the authorities would excommunicate him, so he signed the big lie document. 12. I will declare thy righteousness, and thy works, for they shall not profit thee. 13. When thou criest, let thy companies, stockholders, deliver thee, but the wind shall carry them all away, vanity shall take them, but he that putteth his trust in me, shall possess the land, and shall inherit my holy mountain. 14. And shall say, cast ye up, prepare the way, take up the stumbling block out of the way of my people. Uncover lies, false doctrine, and give them the truth. Right bracket 15. For thus saith the high and lofty one that inhabiteth eternity, whose name is holy, I dwell in the high and holy place, with him also that is of a contrite and humble spirit, to revive the spirit of the humble, and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. Isaiah 58:4-14. Behold, ye fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. Bishop would tell us things that were not for the public. He would say, keep your mouths shut. But the men would go out and tell a friend, and he his friend, and soon it was broadcast to all. This made the bishop angry, and he would storm at the next meeting with threats of punishment, and as he would pound the table with his fist of wickedness, he would say, by hell it has got to stop, or you can't be one with us. Ye shall not fast as ye do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. 5. Is it such a fast that I have chosen? A day for a man to afflict his soul. Is it to bow down his dead as a bulrush, and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Wilt thou call this a fast, and an acceptable day to the Lord? Your iniquities have separated between you and your God that he will not hear. 6. Is not this the fast that I have chosen? To loose the hands of wickedness, bondage temporally and spiritually. Remorse is a burden you cannot lay upon the pure and innocent, neither can you lift it from the hearts of the guilty, for in the night shall it return that man may wake and gaze upon himself. There is no peace to the wicked. 7. Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh. This is the purpose and mission of the relief mine. The poor and the meek shall inherit the earth. He that putteth his trust in me shall possess the land and shall inherit my holy mountain. 8. Then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thine health shall spring forth speedily. And thy righteousness shall go before thee, the glory of the Lord shall be thy reward. Right bracket 9. Then shalt thou call, and the Lord shall answer, thou shalt cry, and he shall say, Here I am. If thou take away from the midst of thee the yoke, the putting forth of the finger and speaking vanity, the signing of a check for several $1,000s in a fraud of deception, was to be made good, exposed and corrected without excuse or justification. 10. And if thou draw out thy soul to the hungry, and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shall thy light rise in obscurity and thy darkness be as the noonday. 11. And the Lord shall guide thee continually, and satisfy thy soul in drought, and make fat thy bones. And thou shalt be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water, whose waters fail not. The bishop was told that the water in the hill would satisfy all our needs during the years of famine and drought. 12. And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt rise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. 13. If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord, honorable, and shalt honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words. 14. Then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father. For the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it. Isaiah 57:16-21. For I will not contend forever, neither will I be always wroth. For the spirit should fail before me, and the souls which I have made. To qualify, one must come with a broken heart and a contrite spirit, put away vanity, pride, boasting, self-righteousness, and have full unwavering confidence in the Most High God. Right bracket 17. For the iniquity of his covetousness was I wroth, and smote him, I hit me, and was wroth, and he went on forwardly in the way of his heart. Do as I say, I am running things. Obedience to me is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. 18. I have seen his ways, and will heal him. I will lead him also, and restore comforts unto him and to his mourners, signifying his death. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 20. But the wicked are like the troubled sea when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. 21. There is no peace, saith my God, to the wicked. Isaiah 58:1-3. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins. 2. Yet they seek me daily, in prayer, etc., and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness, and forsook not the ordinance of their God, would not stand for the changing of the ordinances of the gospel, not transgressing the law. They ask of me the ordinances of justice, they take delight in approaching to God, fasting and praying often. 3. Wherefore have we fasted, say they, and thou seest not? Wherefore have we afflicted our soul, and thou takest no knowledge? Behold, in the day of your fast ye find pleasure, and exact all your labors. We worked all day Thursdays with fasting and prayer, with long prayer meetings in the evening. Isaiah 59:1-3. Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened, that it cannot save, neither his ear heavy, that it cannot hear. 2. But your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid his face from you, that he will not hear. 3. For your hands are defiled with blood, and your fingers with iniquity. Your lips have spoken lies, your tongue hath muttered perverseness. Right bracket If we rebel against Christ and will not believe his word, we make his word a lie, and that is blasphemy. We crucify him anew unto ourselves, and his blood is upon our hands. 1. Golden Kimball was shown that he was to get 500 shares of Dream Mind stock, and it was revealed to Bishop Coyle that he was to give J. Golden Kimball 500 shares of stock, whether he had any money or not. The idea kept working on Brother Kimball, so he decided to go and have a talk with Brother Coyle, and when he went and talked to him, he said, "It has been made known to me that I should get 500 shares of Dream Mind stock." The bishop said, "I know it," and gave him the certificate that had already been made out, waiting for him to come and get it. My experience with John H. Coyle. While teaching school in Fairview, I heard that John H. Coyle had been visited by the 3 immortal Nephites, one of whom gave him a mission from the Lord to open a rich gold mine. It had once been operated by the ancient Nephites, until they became so wicked that the Lord took it from them and destroyed them. The following poem, given to Afton Waters while he was working in the mine in Eureka, tells the reason why. An angel came to Bro. Waters one night and gave him this sacred bit of history. I stood at the open portal of a tunnel peculiarly grand, and the patience required in its digging was famed through all the land, and one of an ancient nation stood guard at the entry there. Hallowed though stern was his visage, snow white were his beard and hair. With the guide I entered the tunnel, its cavernous depths to explore, and as we hastened forward, I felt as I never had felt before, for I knew there was perfect safety, and that I had nothing to fear, for those with motives untainted were protected in working there. Near winds at the end of the tunnel stood another of solemn mien, stern-visaged and armed with saber, as he at the portal had been. and as we passed onward and downward, each landing was guarded the same, until with curious motives prompted, I asked, "Friend, what is thy name? And why dost thou and thy brother stand guard at these workings old? Perhaps in the depths below us are uncounted treasures of gold." To my query he thus made answer, "Son of earth, thou hast rightly said, for I and my brothers are remnants of a nation long since dead. Ages gone, when we dwelt among mortals, these mountains were teeming with wealth, and the Father was granting our people peace, wisdom, great riches and health. In the pride of their hearts, they forsook him, and worshipped but mammon alone, till their sins reached upward to heaven, and earth neath corruption did groan. TWAS then that the spirit ceased striving, and left them to darkness once more, for every man's hand smote his neighbor, and destruction was rapid and sure. And then when the master was dying, and earth neath convulsions did lie, the wealth in these mountains was hidden from an evil and covetous eye. The wealth in these mountains of Ephraim, thus saith the Father, is mine, and all who partake of its fatness, I own it by right most divine. This then is preserved for a people prepared to accomplish his will. The wealth which the Father hath hidden beneath this once notable hill, we are guarding the wealth and the worker, that corruption shall not allure the toiler who enters this tunnel with motives unselfish and pure. But the Father's purposes will ripen, though derision and scoffers abound, and coming from sources unthought of, dark clouds hover closely around. I awoke from my sleep and my dreaming, and sought my companion again, but naught could I see but the mountain, and the place where my visit had been. But I knew that the wealth that was hidden from a nation now under the sod must be used as the prophet hath bidden, for the glorification of God. Brother Waters thought he was to open and work this mine, but he got no direction as to where and how to find it till one day, while in Spanish Fork, someone asked him to go to the annual Dream Mine meeting that was being held on the hill that day. He went gladly. When he saw the mine tunnel, he was greatly surprised and thrilled, for it was the very thing the messenger had shown him in the dream. He took the poem out of his pocket, handed it to Bishop Coyle and said, "Here, Bishop, this belongs to you. It's your work and mission to bring relief to the people in time of great need and trouble." Bishop Coyle gladly received the wonderful new testimony to the divinity of his great mission and work. At this time they were having difficulty getting expense money, so Junius Pierce said, "Bishop, if you will let me have that poem, I'll go out and get some money for you." He took it home that evening, and next morning when he came back to work, Bishop said, "I decided not to let you have that poem," so Junius handed it to him and said, "I don't need it anymore because I memorized it last night. This poem points the way to success and the riches of the earth, and also the riches of eternity, if we will but worship and serve the rightful owner of the same. It also points the way to death and destruction if in our pride we turn from the Lord and worship but mammon alone." A messenger appeared to Bishop Coyle when he was discouraged and calling for help, and showed him a rich body of ore and said, "Does that satisfy you?" To which he said, "Yes." Then the messenger said, "Now turn and look the other way, now turn back and look." The ore was gone, buried up with a great rock slide. The messenger then said, "That is what will happen when the mine comes in if envy and strife, jealousy and greed enter in, and you can put your men to work, but they will never find it." Bishop Coyle was shown in a night vision that he was traveling along a road, life's highway, then it divided into two roads, and he did not know which to take. Then a messenger appeared and said, "If you take the right road, everything will be all right, but if you follow the wrong road, you will have trouble plenty. One road leads to success, the other to disappointment." Mary Miner, a distant relative of mine, was living in California, taking care of the LDS missionaries. A stranger entered into the work helping the elders, which made for great success. Mary was so impressed with him and the work that she thought he was more than ordinary. She asked the Lord about him, and it was revealed to her that he was one of the 3 Nephites, and his name was Zedekiah. She asked him to go to Provo and see her brother, which he did. He came to the Miner farm while they were in town shopping. As they came into the farm, he walked out to meet them. They, Melvin and Zed as he called himself, became close and dear friends. He had great power to do things that frightened some and pleased others. He would tell them to look, and they would see visions of spiritual things of rich beauty. He wrote many revelations concerning the saints and the tribes sitting in darkness, who would be favored of the Lord in these days of fulfillment, when the more faithful shall see an angel from the Lord, even Moroni, descending in a cloud as of old. To which thing you must bear solemn and sober witness not many days hence. You shall know if you are faithful and shall see his power. As he parts the clouds of glory in that solemn hour. I shall show the heavenly records wrought on plates of gold. If you hasten and make ready as you have been told. Lo, I come to do the bidding of my God and King. To show to the prophet records I must bring. May man dictate to his Maker what the Lord can do. Surely from the lowest station Christ has come to you. Priest or priestess, man or woman, dare man name the sex. Prophetess or prophet judging and my spirit vex. Keep your faith ever burning bright, is the Lord's command. And your eyes shall see those records from Moroni's hand. This is a sample of the things he wrote which were not for the public at present. Mapleton needed a school teacher badly, so Zed applied and got the job. By Christmas time his class could pass the test for the entire year. He was so outstanding that jealousies and hate were stirred up to the point where two fellows plotted to kill him. The plot was revealed to Zed that these two were lying in wait with a shotgun in some shrubs, by the path he usually walked home on. At the warning, Zed turned back and went another way, thus thwarting their evil plan. But persecution increased, and a complaint was issued for his arrest. The sheriff arrested him and put him in Provo City Jail. When the keeper shut the steel door and locked it, the door flew open. This he did several times, not being able to lock Zed in, but he did not try to leave. John Roundy, a Temple official and a dear friend of Zed's, came over from Spanish Fork to visit him in jail. They went back home in a heavy snowstorm, and when they opened the door of their home, there sat Zed by the fireplace. He had entered without making any track in the fresh snow that was 6 inches deep. The jailer was indeed glad to get rid of him. Will Roundy, a son of John, went with Zed to the Dream Mine and around the valley in search of 6 special witnesses, highly favored to have this privilege. He could tell by shaking hands with them whether they were the right ones and trustworthy. I was surprised at some he rejected whom I figured would pass. Right bracket he met with the 6 and gave them instructions and information that they would not divulge. But they were pale as ghosts when they got through. Zed said to them, I have work in California that must be attended to at once. So he left saying, I will write from the west. 2 days later they got a letter from him that was postmarked by a postmaster in California 2 hours after he left Spanish Fork. There were no airplanes in those days. While Zed was here, the Lord told him to go to President Joseph F. Smith to receive certain blessings. He went to the president's office and was invited in. He sat there for a long time waiting for some action. President could do nothing until his 2 counselors left. Then he explained that the Lord had revealed to him the identity of Zed, but not to his counselors. The Lord told Zed, not until thou art washed and anointed by my high priest and servant, shalt thou be a prophet in these latter days, a special messenger to the tribes sitting in darkness, a sifter and refiner to the saints of latter days. All who reject these servants shall perish from off the earth. In another dream the bishop saw himself and wife sitting in the front room when an angel came with a beautiful bouquet of flowers. This angel tried to pin the flowers on the bishop, but he refused to permit it. Several times this was repeated with the same results. Then the angel said, now that is the proper attitude, never allow anyone to praise and flatter you with the honor of men. Thine, O Lord, be the honor and the power and the glory forever. Amen. As long as he was in harmony with the Spirit of the Lord, he received direction by the Spirit of the Lord. Even as Joel said, your old men shall dream dreams, right bracket, your young men shall see visions, and I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, saith the Lord. Bishop Coyle was told that if he would preach the gospel and live the gospel on the hill, Satan would not have power to shut the mine down, or have power over the workers on the hill. But he will go to the people in the valley and stir up trouble and create opposition to the work. A man in Springville started the ball rolling by sending a letter to the church authorities in Salt Lake City, claiming Bishop Coyle was defrauding widows and poor people by selling them worthless stock and getting rich himself. Bishop Coyle had another dream. He saw the Mormons driven out of Mexico with only a small pack on their backs, leaving all their wealth behind. It wasn't long after that when Joseph F. Smith got up in conference and said, "We have a wonderful faithful people in Mexico who are entitled to all the blessings and ordinances of the gospel. Therefore our next temple will be built in Mexico." Some of the stockholders heard this statement and rushed to Bishop Coyle with the news, to which Bishop replied, "Well, if what I saw comes true, they won't need a temple there." Someone told President Smith that Bishop Coyle was prophesying against him and the church. This started a wave of persecution and investigation into the works there, and the life of Bishop Coyle, and the mine was closed as a result. This shutdown lasted about 6 years, during which time Press Smith died. He then appeared to Bishop Coyle and said, "I was the one who closed the mine down, and it is my responsibility to see that it is opened up, and you go to work according to the purpose and mission of the mine." This was not enough to move Bishop into action. He had to be directed by the Living Church president. President Heber J. Grant was checking over the Spanish Fork Co-op accounts, and saw that the Dream Mine owed them a sum of money. He asked why don't they pay this debt. He was told that the church closed the mine and they can't get any money from the people, stockholders. He asked them if opening the mine and going to work would pay their bills. They said, yes. He then said, "Tell Bishop Coyle to open the mine and pay his debts," and still Bishop Coyle would not go ahead without a written statement from President Grant. This was soon given and the mine opened and paid its debts. Carter Grant, a seminary teacher who called President Grant Uncle Heber, was closely associated and friendly. Carter was aspiring to the high calling of seminary supervisor for the whole church, but his record was in question because of his activities with Bishop Coyle in promoting the Dream Mine. He was told to sever his connections with the mine and Bishop Coyle in order to qualify or even hold his present position. Carter asked President Grant if he had asked the Lord and received any direction from him by way of a revelation, to which he replied, "No, I do not trouble the Lord with such foolish things." Carter said, "If you can produce a revelation from the Lord against the Dream Mine, I will go gladly along with you. As it stands now, I believe it is true and of the Lord." Carter was one of Coyle's best friends, a strength and support to him and the work. Through his influence many people became interested and bought stock. About this time the bishop had a dream in which he saw himself and Carter going along a road together. The church and the government kept falling trees across the road trying to block their way. Then they came to a beautiful stream of clear water. Bishop waded across, but Carter said, "This is as far as I can go with you." So Coyle went along the road till he came to a side road leading to the right. He had been told to turn neither to the right nor to the left, but to keep on the straight and narrow, but he turned right and went in a semicircle which led into a building. It was a small frame building, and there was about 3 feet of ground around it. Bishop sat down by the table to do some figuring when 3 snakes came from under the floor. The largest extended its head right over to the bishop, who stuck out his finger, and the snake bit it. Coyle put his finger in his mouth to suck the poison out, then rubbed it on his clothes and said, "It didn't hurt much." Some time later the bishop called a special meeting of all the more faithful stockholders for a fasting and prayer period. The day appointed rolled around and about 30 of us met on the hill. We loaded into a truck and a few cars and went up to a green spot. He had seen in a dream that deliverance would come when he climbed up to that spot. Bishop Coyle dreamed that he and Bishop Bullock, another inspirational mining man, were climbing the mountain by way of a ravine, while the people of the church and others were throwing rocks and shooting at them until they got on top and on the green spot. Then everything was rosy and friendly and he had wealth. At this prayer meeting I was over anxious to exercise much faith to help the cause come forth to deliverance. But I was disappointed, for the longer we prayed, the less confidence I had. Listening to different ones praising Bishop Coyle and telling the Lord what a righteous people we were, the best people on earth, seemed to me just plain simple vanity. When the meeting was over, I said to the bishop, "I guess I will have to repent and humble myself, for I just couldn't feel right and full of that good spirit which gives hope and confidence in our efforts to reach the Lord." The bishop agreed with me that I was the one out of tune. While we were in this meeting calling for help, 3 chemists in Colorado got together and received inspiration directed from the same spirit to go to Utah and sell a new process for extracting metals from ore with acid instead of fire. They had heard about the Dream Mine and decided without delay to contact the bishop. They rushed to Salt Lake City and got in touch with the Glissmeyers, who brought them straight to Coyle. He was wide open for business because he had been shown that a man would come with a new process that would revolutionize the mining industry. They made a deal and went to work training Merrill Coyle and Willard Fuller in the processing of the ore. In about 2 weeks or so they were able to produce a beautiful sample of bright orange selenium suspended in a gallon glass jug of water. Everyone was happy that success had at last come. Bishop Coyle was sold 100% and made the deal. He wrote a check for a good number of thousands of dollars and gave it to John Harper and his 2 partners. People were so thrilled and sure we were all going to get rich that they filled the treasury with money. The bishop felt so rich he wanted to pay his debts. So he and the mine secretary went to Roosevelt to pay a widow some money that they had borrowed from her to operate the mine. That night Bishop Coyle had a dream that on the way back to Spanish Fork, they met a passenger train going east, and there was a great long snake on the train. The next day they met the train, and when they got home, Bishop tried to find John Harper, and to his great surprise, John Harper was right bracket on that train. He had cashed the check, taken the money and was gone. Merrill and Willard could not get any more selenium showings, and the whole scheme fizzled out. A big fraud. The bishop figured the stockholders would not support the work, so he decided to go into the chicken business for a livelihood. He found plenty of good gravel, and put us all to work building 2 houses for Lewis Waite and Willard Fuller to live in, and about 4 chicken coops which they filled with chickens. Ivan Coons, who knew how to tend them, was put in charge. I was not so sure about the new industry as a part of the mine program. Coyle was always quoting, "Obedience is better than sacrifice and to hearken than the fat of rams. Do what I tell you to do. Obedience to the Lord's commands and direction is required." He would say a man being made a bishop is always a bishop and is a judge over the people. I kept having dreams. At this time I had a dream that we had a granary full of wheat. It was built upon 4 stacks of lime rocks under the corners, and was elevated about 18 inches above the ground. I looked under the granary and saw a small stream of wheat pouring onto the ground. I tried to see if I could plug the leak, but was unable to do so. Then a string of the neighbor's chickens came running under the bin and ate the wheat and returned to their coops. I thought, this will never do, so I stepped into the granary and saw a funnel-shaped hole where the wheat was sinking down. I had no way to stop it, so I had to let it go. Bishop Coyle dreamed that he and his wife were riding on a beautiful passenger train headed for success. The train stopped at a station, and Bishop and his wife got off to get something to eat at a lunch counter, and the train pulled out right bracket and left them. But soon a slow old gravel train came along and they got on it and rode along for a while, and it stopped. The crew said, "This is the end of our run," so the bishop got off and was walking alone down the track. This gravel train was work on the cement houses and chicken coops we were building in order to get food something to eat at the inn. After building the houses and the chicken coops, he insisted on building wheat bins and storing up wheat, but the company said this is the end of our run, and the gravel train stopped. While I was pushing a wheelbarrow hauling gravel for the chicken coops one day, Bishop took a wire and tied it to the front and helped pull the wheelbarrow. Then suddenly his dream came to my mind, and I said, "Bishop, this is a slow old gravel train." He dropped that wire like a hot iron and didn't come to help again. This was the first he had realized he was on the gravel train. At this time I had another dream that Howard Grant, a seminary teacher in Arizona, came rushing up in a black new car. He said, "Bishop, come and I will show you where rich gold is, right up the road in Water Canyon." So Bishop Coyle, Lewis Wright, Willard Fuller and I got in the car and up the road we went. We were clipping along nicely about halfway up the canyon when suddenly the car stopped and started rolling backwards. I became frightened and said, "Howard, put your foot on that brake, or we will all be destroyed." He paid no heed. Then said Bishop, "Put your foot on that brake or we will all be destroyed," but he would not budge. Then I parted the front seat and slapped the brake to the floor, but there was no brake, so we plunged off, more than 1,000 feet to the bottom of the canyon, landing right side up. We all got out of the car and looked at each other. I said to Howard, "You had right bracket, better get your brakes fixed." He took a brush out of a quart can and began to paint around his hat band. Lewis walked over and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Jesse, I want to thank you for saving our lives." I said, "Don't thank me. I tried but could do no good, thank the Lord." A few days later I went to spend the evening with Bishop Coyle. We sat in his kitchen, one at each end of the table, and were having a very enjoyable time talking about the wonderful manifestations he had received from the messengers and the Lord. Suddenly a loud knock came at the front door, and in popped Howard Grant, all fired up with the good news of success to come. He had visited a woman in Arizona who had lost her husband and almost lost her mind when suddenly she became spiritual and began telling fortunes. She told Howard that he was interested in a mining proposition and described Bishop Coyle as being short, somewhat stoop-shouldered, and that he was making a cross-cut at the mine and would strike gold in September, and 6 months later he would strike it very rich. At this point I spoke up and said, Bishop, a man holding the Melchizedek priesthood after the order of the Son of God, should get his direction from the Lord. You know what happened to Saul when he went to the witch of Endor. He lost his kingdom and wives and was destroyed by death. That word made Howard angry, and he grabbed his hat, rushed out and slammed the door. Next morning when Bishop and his son Merrill came up to the mine for breakfast and prayer and to instruct the workers, he had an angry look and a harsh voice as he said, I got some good news from Howard last night, and if old Young had kept his mouth shut, I'd got the rest of it. He then began laying judgments upon me and said, How do you like that, Young? I said, It's all right, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. The men chuckled a bit and we all went out of the house to go to work. From there on the bishop put me away from the others to work alone, so I couldn't talk to the other men. Then I had another dream. I saw Bishop Coyle sitting in front of the bunkhouse and I walked over, picked up my lunch bucket and walked past him down the road. He said to me "WHAT, do you want to go that way for? That's not the way to go." I said, "Yes, this is the best way for me to go." And when I got to the turn in the road, I looked back and Bishop was down on his hands and knees scrubbing his face in the gravel and roaring loud with pain and anguish. I told this dream to the men, and someone told it to the bishop. He didn't like that, so he put me to work on the road alone and said, "You can scrub your face in that gravel, and see how you like it." I had a dream then, that I was standing in front of Bishop's house, and a large snake 6 inches in diameter and 15 feet long came slowly toward me from the south. The next day while I was working, Bishop came slowly up to me and asked if I was reading them Revelations from Glenn Demings, to which I said, "Yes, I am searching for light and truth from every source I can find, for God is the author of all truth." Well, he said, "There ain't nobody can read them Revelations and work on this hill." With that he walked away. When quitting time came, I took my lunch bucket and went to the bishop and said, "I won't be back to work tomorrow." "Why not?" he asked. I said, "You say we can't work here if we read Glenn Demings' writings." "I intend to read everything I can find." Then he said, "You come back to work, it will be all right." The bishop said the first ore would come from on top, so he put us to work in Water Canyon, where we worked on 6 right bracket prospects, some of which showed good signs of success. The trouble is that no one has been able to tell what the bright silvery metal is. One night I dreamed that I was coming off the hill, and when I got out on the point of Knob Hill, I looked down to the cabin, and 2 wolves were hanging around the bunkhouse. So I raised my rifle and shot twice at them, and they both scampered off the hill so fast they made the dust fly. That was Bishop and his son, Merrill. They both left some time later. Bishop didn't like the idea of others having dreams about the mine, and when I told him a dream, he angrily turned to me and said, "Who's dreaming about this mine, you or me?" As well might man put forth his puny arm to stop the Missouri River in its decreed course, as to stop the Lord from pouring down revelations upon the heads of the latter-day saints. In days of old, revelations came not by the will of man but holy men of God, spake as they were moved upon by the Holy Ghost. About this same time I dreamed I was standing on the flat east of the bishop's house with my hands and chin resting on the shovel handle. I looked to the north and saw a group of men, 8 or 10, standing in a circle with their arms over each other's shoulders, and their heads bowed as if in a prayer circle. They broke the circle and they all turned their faces toward me. Then I recognized them as the general authorities of the church who had passed to the other side. One of them walked over to me, and I felt so humble and thankful to greet President Joseph F. Smith. He had a beautiful gold watch in his hand, which he extended to me saying, "Take this watch. It is for you." I said, "I have a good gold watch and do not need another." He said, "Your watch will not do, you must take this right bracket one." So I meekly reached out my hand and took the valuable treasure. Then he looked at my feet and said, "Brother Young, we have something very good for you if you will clean your feet." Then I looked at my feet and saw dried clay mud on both shoes about an inch high all around both shoes. Then he asked, "Will you clean your feet?" And I said, "Yes, I will clean my feet." He looked pleased and turned and went back to the other brethren. I awoke from my sleep and pondered the meaning and began to search for the interpretation, and it was given to me that I was to bear testimony against them. A warning, then judgments would follow. The watch was to signify the office of a watchman. In a prayer meeting, Bishop called on me to pray. I acknowledged before the Lord our weaknesses and quoted from Isaiah where the Lord said, "I called but none would answer, I called again, but none would hear. So I put on vengeance and trod the winepress alone. Your iniquities have separated between you and your God that he will not hear." This was too much for the bishop. He never would call on me to take part again, but began to persecute and slander me before the workers. One of the men said to me, "You may not be working here very long." To which I replied, "I'll be here when a lot of you are gone. They have all gone years ago and are forgotten. I got a job in Provo and didn't go back to work at the mine for a while. I had a dream in which I was walking with the bishop up in Water Canyon, looking for some ore to work on. We stopped by number 6, and I picked up some ore and said, 'Here is the right place to work, Bishop.' He was not interested but hastened on up the mountain and over into Flat Canyon. A few right bracket 100 feet down the other slope we came to a ledge and turned west. As we walked along this rim, it began to crumble and fall. I said, 'Bishop, we had better get on solid footing.' I stepped over onto solid ground, but he made no attempt to save himself, and the mountain opened up. A great chasm swallowed the bishop, and he went thousands of feet down into the bowels of the earth. I went to the bishop's house and announced to Lewis Waite and the family that bishop was dead. There was much weeping among them. I dreamed again that I walked into the bishop's room where he was sitting in his armchair. I stepped up to him and said, "Bishop, we have all got to set our homes in order before we can get results in the mine." At this he was disturbed and angry. He reached out, grabbed my tie and with a piece of chalk, wrote the figure 4 on my tie, then hesitated. Excitedly I asked, "What did you do that for? What does it mean?" He answered, "That is power of death in the canyon to you." This frightened me and I awoke wondering who had sinned unto death. This was in 1946, so I concluded that death would come in the 40s, which would be the limit of time for setting our houses in order. I went to the bishop and told him the dream. He resented this because he felt that his house was in order and that he was highly favored of the Lord. I learned later that he had written the date of his own passing, which was in the 40s. He died in 1949. Soon after this I had another dream in which I was standing on the foothills below the mine looking up the little canyon. Suddenly a large new bright red caterpillar came pushing heaps of dirt and rock, leveling the ground. No one could be seen operating it. Then I saw Bishop Coyle and his son, Merrill, standing right square in front of the huge blade right bracket, and I yelled at them to get out of the way, or they would be crushed and buried up. Neither of them paid any attention to me, and the blade pushed a big pile of waste over Bishop and buried him up completely, but Merrill was between two piles of waste, and when the blade went over him, he crawled out and walked away. This huge caterpillar represents the newly appointed general authorities of the church, who were out to crush everything that was out of line with their thinking and policies. Bishop Coyle was taken before the council and asked a long list of questions about his claims for the mine, all of which he answered in the affirmative. They then asked him to sign his name to this report, to which he agreed if they would give him an opportunity to have a meeting with the presidency of the church to tell his story and mission of the mine. This they agreed to do before publishing the report. But they changed all the yes answers to no, and published the report without giving him a hearing with the authorities. When Bishop saw that report, he was shocked into despair and sorrow and shouted, "It's a lie! It's a lie!" His name was signed to a document denying the divinity of the mine, and making his life's work a fraud and a delusion. He was told never to sign his name to any documents, but he trusted in the arm of flesh and lost. From this shock he never recovered, but got weaker and weaker until he was finally possessed of evil spirits. It took days of fasting and praying and administering by the priesthood before he was delivered. He contracted pneumonia and died soon after. Just before he died, he called a few of his closest friends to a meeting. They kneeled in prayer, the bishop being mouth. In substance he said, "Lord, I have done all you told me to do, and I now turn the mine back into your hands." Right bracket with this action a great and heavy burden was lifted from Bishop's shoulders. Isaiah 15:18. I have seen his ways and will heal him, I will lead him also and restore comforts unto him and to his mourners. His great mission was finished, he relaxed and soon passed away to the sorrow and disappointment of his close friends and followers, but to the joy and satisfaction of his enemies, who supposed this would be the end of the dream mine. But to the believing, these comforting words bring joy and satisfaction. The works and the designs and the purposes of God cannot be frustrated, neither can they come to naught. For God doth not walk in crooked paths, neither doth he turn to the right hand nor to the left, neither doth he vary from that which he hath said, therefore his paths are straight, and his course is one eternal round. Remember that it is not the work of God that is frustrated, but the work of men. D&C 3:1-3. When the time for the annual stockholders' meeting drew near, there was a tremendous effort put forth by a faction of stockholders to manipulate themselves into office and control of the mine. I dreamed that I drove my Model A Ford to Spanish Fork and saw Steve Wood and a woman with their heads together plotting on how to manipulate themselves into control of the mine. I stopped and looked at them, and Steve said, "We are working for president of the mine." I said, "You will never make it," and drove away. The meeting was called, and the various factions tried to take over by foul or fair means, which turned into troubled waters, throwing up mire and dirt. In a board meeting, Quayle Dixon was appointed president, 2 board members resigned, others were appointed, and things smoothed out, and we went to work. Then I dreamed that I was carried in the spirit up to the saddle above the mine. I had a pick and shovel, so I started digging for values and found rich nuggets of gold, yet the rock did not look like quartz, just grey rock. The grey rock was more valuable than gold because it has life-saving substances in it. From it we get a non-acid battery fluid which produces a life-giving electric charge, and the powdered ore makes a soil conditioner that will produce the most wholesome food on earth. Healthful food. Al Sinclair revealed its value to us and bought 500 pounds of it, for which he paid $500. This deal stopped the state from closing the mine. I kept digging until I was down about 4 feet. Then I raised up and looked up the ridge and saw a man coming down from the peak through the air without touching the ground, swiftly, till he stopped. He reached his hand down, took hold of my hand and lifted me out of the pit. He put his left arm over my shoulders and raised his right arm to the square and shouted to the valley below. This man is acceptable because he has health and consecration uppermost in mind. He vanished quickly and I got back to work in the pit and made a trench about 15 feet long. I was taking out the values, and Bishop Coyle stepped in beside me. He stepped down and examined the rocks and turned to me and said, "We had better get out of here, because there is apt to be a lot of blood shed here." I followed him for a few steps and stopped. He vanished and I stood looking over the valley and to the north toward Flat Canyon. In the distance I could see objects coming toward me, and as they came closer, I saw that they were horsemen riding 4 abreast. Each man was dressed with a breechcloth and had a bow and arrow pointed straight forward. The horses were all bay in color, slick and beautiful, with no bridle to guide them. As they turned down into Water Canyon, they disappeared. They walked in the air, not touching the ground, and the end of the formation I could not see. Then I understood that they were protecting this holy mountain, and I need not fear. The next instant I was in the mine. I stepped up to the face of the drift and saw a shelf about 2 feet high on the face of the drift. I took a pick and began picking it down when I noticed color in the quartz, and began picking out gold nuggets, and when I got a handful, I started out to find a processor. The next thing I was in the mill sitting on a platform step on the west side of the 2nd floor. Then I looked to the door and in stepped a short plump black man with a heavy jet black head of hair combed back over his head. He sprightly stepped up to me and reached up to shake hands with me, which I did and said, "Well, if it isn't the little dark Lamanite in person," and he acknowledged that he was. He was the one that had been appearing to the foreman of the mine giving him instructions contrary to the bishop. He was of the Gadianton robber gang spoken of in the Book of Mormon. This was revealed to Bishop Coyle, and the foreman admitted it was true. Quayle put me in charge of mining and said, "Go where you will, but find the ore." So my son, J. Young, Erwin Thorne, and I went to work at the place I saw in my dream. We worked the 4th finger and began to find values. Then one day we drilled into a new formation. I saved the drillings and gave them to the assayer, Dr. Brooksby. He got a gold button so rich he would not tell us the value. The next day we went in and there was the shelf on the face of the drift, and beyond that was a vast body of rich ore. We were so sure of success that Quayle and the board went out and bought 3,000 feet of air pipe which we put in the tunnel. We also got a compressor and jackhammer and went to work, but the values were burned and lost in the smelting process because jealousies and zeal to domineer disqualified us. I dreamed that an important meeting would be called on the hill, and that I came over the ridge and down by the bunkhouse. The atmosphere was pleasant as I stood in front of the house looking down the gully at some fleecy white clouds floating up the ravine toward the east. Then within the clouds appeared a person dressed in white apparel. His countenance was most pleasant and inspiring to look upon, and with a sweet smile, he floated right in front of me and vanished in the clouds, going up the mountain. A day or so after, Quayle came up and said, "We are going to have a strange man come to meet with us and get some ore that is in this mountain." Quayle asked me to come to his home in Spanish Fork at 7 and ride to the hill with him. I got there a little early and was sitting in the living room when a knock came at the door, and Annetta went and let a man in. She introduced me to him. Then I recognized him as the person I saw in the clouds. I rode with him in the car up to the hill and heard the words of inspired instruction flow from his lips, telling us how to qualify for the blessing and riches the Lord holds in reserve for a people prepared to do his will. He told of strontium-90 fallout and other poisons that will destroy the crops and pollute the air, and that we must get the soil condition out of the relief mine, and apply the electric culture to counteract all these evils, and give us wholesome food, and restore health to our bodies and minds. The famine will come by destruction of the crops of the earth in drought, floods, or hail, etc. Unity and a full trust in the Lord was his constant plea. Do not say, Al says, but thus saith the Lord. If I can only qualify as a faithful servant, I will do well. Each time he comes back he says, disunity prevails, repent and serve the Lord. But the warnings were disregarded, so he came all the way from Texas, went to Quayle and said, "Come with me, we must move the troublemakers off the hill." They went up and ordered the three Phil Husser, Freddie Bangerter and Alfred Brookspeter gather up all their belongings and leave the hill forthwith. They did. The idea in back of all of this is I feel very thankful for the things the Lord has shown me. I have learned that obedience to instructions from the Lord is the only way to obtain favors with him and receive the blessing promised. Truth is truth, it doesn't matter whether people receive it or not. In order to receive the blessings promised by the Lord, we will have to live according to the word of the Lord, which says, Zion cannot be redeemed, except it be upon the laws of the celestial kingdom. This includes plurality of wives and the law of consecration.